Be one of the most anticipated films of the year.
Yeah.
Mank, the 11th film from David Fincher.
The
Dave,
return to film too.
are
It's
you
been
a
6 years.
David Fincher fan? Do you like him? Think he
I
makes
mean,
good movies?
yeah, I mean, who's like, I don't like David Fincher? That's so weird, you know?
That you know that there's someone out there though, and I hope that they like turn this on, and we're hoping we were gonna just like totally eviscerate him, and now it's like punching the air.
Yeah.
Cause yeah, who the hell hates David Fincher? Just makes like the best movies in Hollywood.
I mean, of the past few decades, he's one of, if not the only people that has a legitimate, like, objective, quote unquote, claim to having the best movie in two different decades: Zodiac in the 2000s, The Social Network in the 2010s. And whether you agree with that specifically or not, he's right there for that kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, we loved Mindhunter, but it has been 6 years since he made a feature film. That would be Gone Girl in 2014.
Also a
Great,
great movie.
great movie. But this is his first feature film since we've been doing this podcast. It's been a minute, and this is also a very exciting, you know, film prospect for him to make. So very excited about the Fincher of it all. But um, also this being about the guy who wrote Citizen Kane, and the authorship of Citizen Kane being so famous and so lauded and so hotly debated for decades. Definitely an exciting return, in my opinion.
Yeah. Dave, maybe a good place to start with this is I know we both recently watched Citizen Kane in anticipation of this movie. I'm not
Yes.
sure if it was a rewatch for you or not. I'd only seen scenes throughout my childhood. I'd never actually watched it straight through.
Yeah.
What was just your impression of Citizen Kane? Obviously regarded as one of the best movies of all time, but
Right. So I had never actually seen it. I had seen some like stills and stuff, but it was a movie that um I don't think I ever like was this ever on cable? I don't think it was. Like
not a
and
lot.
like no one ever put it in front of me growing up. So it was just something that I knew everyone said was amazing and I should watch it. And when I made an I Check Movies account in 2010, it was on the watch list. I've wanted to watch this movie for legitimately 10 years at least, yet I haven't until uh very recently. But yeah, as you said, it's one of the most widely regarded films of all time. Was the top of the Sight and Sound poll for decades until the most recent poll when it slipped just to number two. And we'll get an update on that poll once again in 2 years. And yeah, watching it for the first time, I was like, wow, yeah, Citizen Kane, it's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah.
It fucking goes. So much to like about it, and Orson Welles in particular. Uh,
Mhm.
Great performance. The makeup techniques they used to age Kane throughout the movie really stood out to me. And also just so many shots and techniques that and like motifs throughout Citizen Kane that have become staples and almost cliches in modern movie making. That you're like, oh, this is the genesis of that. You think of like the mirror scene
Mhm.
towards the end of the movie, which we recently saw in The Last Jedi, for example.
Yep.
But yeah, the Citizen Kane, so good, and to see something kind of mimic that structure in Mank, I thought really impressed me because Citizen Kane is famous for its uh, non-linearity,
Yep.
differing groups of narrators, and their reliability being up and down, and we're kind of getting that again with Mank and Herman Mankiewicz's reflection on his past in a non-linear fashion. So, big Citizen Kane guy. What about you?
Yeah, I think what I was most struck by outside of the intelligence of the screenplay and how it really, especially for the time, was such a unique and challenging way to tell a story.
Right.
Non-traditional for that period, jumping around timelines, kind of some mixed reliability in terms of narrator at different points.
Hmm.
And I kind of letting the viewer take away what they wanted to from the film. I think there's some messages that kind of clearly come through, but I think there's a lot more you can take away depending on how you want to interpret things. Um, that and just the visual cinematography of it. There's so many scenes that are shot with like light just creating silhouette and shadow. Um, Really large open spaces. I'm thinking about like Kane sitting in front of the fireplace as his wife, works on the puzzle and how that room just felt massive and hollow and so
Right.
empty, and it really created that sense of like loneliness for Kane. It's just so impressively done for that
Mhm.
time period. I mean, to be to like movies at all and be and watch that, and if you came away saying you didn't find it impressive, at least I don't know if you really like movies as much as you think you do.
Right, exactly.
So we come into Mank, this story, like you preface very well, about Herman Mankiewicz, a famous uh, theater writer, screenwriter, critic, very intelligent man, Jewish American, um, and I found this to be a interesting, and I felt like a little underwhelming. But I also think that speaks to just how high my expectations were for Fincher, that I
Mhm.
was like, this movie is gonna blow me away. And I think I left it being like, that was pretty good. Great homage, I think, in a lot of ways to Kane. Like you mentioned, it mirrors or mimics a lot of it. But I think it didn't quite meet the lofty expectations I had for it.
Yeah, I think expectations going in play a big part because Mank is about Herman Mankiewicz, but it's not really about Mank writing Citizen Kane. And I think going in, a lot of people expected this to be Fincher's thoughts on Raising Kane, the famous essay from Pauline Kael, the lauded film critic, and where she questioned the authorship of the Kane screenplay, which notably won the Best Original Screenplay Oscar for both Mank and Wells.
Mhm.
And the charge was that it was really all Mank. And, the auteurist theory versus movies being of a piece with everyone and the devaluing of the screenwriter. There's a lot of, I think, important themes and ideas that Kale was getting at, but it seems to be for the most part that the scholarship of that essay has been largely challenged and debunked, I guess you could say, but the spirit of what she was saying probably still lasts. So I think people were thinking that this might have more of a, I think, more of a take, quote unquote, on that idea. And it's notable because Mank was written by David Fincher's dad, Jack
Yeah.
Fincher, who passed away in like 2003, I think it was. This movie was most largely written in the 90s, but apparently, actually, David Fincher, when he first took a look at the pass of the script, that thought, that KLS thought, was more prevalent in the script. And David Fincher doesn't appear to actually subscribe to that. So he challenged his dad to, I think, change it, right? And like you watch this movie and you get that big Wells scene at the end where Wells actually
Mhm.
comes to meet Mank, but it doesn't really have as much of a, I think, pointed opinion on that idea. And
Right.
it's, like I think some people thought this was gonna be like Oliver Stone's JFK, where it's like this
Mm.
is what happened,
Yeah.
even though I have no idea if this is how it happened. So we didn't get that, but I was really impressed with something I didn't expect, which was the political resonance
Mm.
of the story, which is again communicated really just through the flashbacks. So
Yeah.
I think it's a really impressive movie. But yeah, I mean, expectations and hype
Were
were high
enormous.
despite not really knowing a lot about what the movie really was going to be.
Yeah, I agree. I think the political resonance is probably the most like the biggest takeaway. But as I'm thinking about the moments that really stood out to me, I think similar to Kane, this story is about a very complicated person. Obviously, when you think about Citizen Kane, you're talking about one of the wealthiest, most accomplished people in the country in that story. But
Yes.
in this, I mean, Herman Mankiewicz is a very lost and kind of like all over the place type of person.
Hmm.
He's an alcoholic, he's a gambler, he's got a lot of debts, but at the same time, you hear these stories about how he sponsored families to leave Germany
Right.
as the Nazis were taking over to help them get out of there. His movies and the things he worked on were banned in Germany because of how much he spoke out against the Nazi Reich. Um, you know it's a complicated person. You see moments where he's an absolute asshole pig, and you see moments where he's very sweet and gentle and caring. And um, kind of finding what's really at the center of all that, I thought was really interesting story to follow.
Absolutely. And you know, that's a big point about some of the virtues of Mank as a guy. Nicely contrasted later on, where Louis B. Mayer, who I think everyone knows is one of the founders of MGM, but also known for kind of being a piece of shit, really, and how he ran his studio and everything. But
Yeah.
his comments, I mean, like Germany, you can't close off that market now, can you? You know, the topic of the Nazis, and I actually really like that first scene where you're at William Randolph Hearst's like dinner party where they're all kind of sitting around that room in a funny way. Everyone's on like couches and seats and stuff, and
Hmm.
kind of talking throughout this big room. I feel like a really awkward way to have people hang out together personally. Um, but that I really like that because that was when Mank was still in everyone's good graces because it's earlier on in the flashback story, you know,
Hmm.
and that had like a pulse to it, the way they were all like chiming into the convos and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the movie does a really good job of illustrating how eloquent Mank apparently was in real life. And they say
Hmm.
in the movie, Hearst doesn't like how you write; he likes how you talk.
Hmm.
And by all accounts, Mank was a really smart and engaging person to be around. It kind of explains how his career panned out, you know, as he fell from grace but managed to hang around for a long time. So
Yeah, and I think casting Oldman, Gary Oldman in the lead role was a smart move because Gary Oldman is known to be one of the most languid and intelligent actors out there at the moment,
yeah.
and I think he portrays Mank really well. It's funny, um, we've seen Oldman do a lot recently. I mean,
Hmm.
he won for Churchill, right? I
Yep.
mean,
Darkest Hour,
Darkest
Best Actor.
Hour, while maybe not being the most interesting film, I think definitely great performance from him. And you
Hmm.
kind of see him looking like a chubby Gary Oldman here, but I think really slips into that role and allows him to become Mankiewicz in a lot of ways, very impressively.
Right. I like that performance as Mank. There's been a lot of talk about his casting because Gary Oldman is notably older than Mank was at the time of his death, let alone the time this movie's taking place and in the flashbacks. Also, we kind of got an unfortunate like Hollywood thing happen here where the actress who plays his wife, it's a small part, but Mank and his wife were born the same year in real life, yet the actor
Mm,
who plays her is like
younger.
30 years younger than Oldman.
Hmm.
I mean, like that's kind of like the whole Hollywood bullshit where they don't cast older women anymore. You didn't need to do that. And to me, it actually kind of made me raise an eyebrow because I was like, she looks quite young. That's his wife. That's not like his daughter or something. Like that was a little strange
Right.
to me.
Well, and especially when it's kind of juxtaposed against Amanda Seyfried playing Marion Davies, right? And
Yeah.
looking really young and gorgeous, and I thought she was absolutely enrapturing in
Yes.
that role. I think you really get to see Seyfried show out more than I
She's
ever
very
thought
good
she
in it.
could, and it's kind of crazy because she's probably going to get nominated for an Academy Award for this and
Right.
supporting actress. I think she'll be the first one from Mean Girls to do that, which is
Yeah.
after
Wait,
Mean Girls came out.
Rachel McAdams might have been
I don't
nominated, right?
I don't think so. I don't know. I'll look that up as we're talking,
Yeah.
but
Good point.
it's just really uh, kind of crazy, like you were saying, to see this very young wife of Megvitz who's the same age, so then looking the same age as this, I don't know, platonic affair he's having. Uh, pretty interesting. I'm wondering, outside of Seafried, were there any other performances or like scenes that really like swept you up, or things about the movie that really captured you?
Sure. Oh, and McAdams was nominated for supporting in Spotlight in 2016, but
Ah,
she didn't win.
good
Seyfried
call.
might have a good chance to win, so
Interesting.
that would still hold your theory here. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that dinner scene. I thought that had like a really nice pulse to it. I really liked again the resonant politics stuff where you get like Louis Mayer talking about his disdain for Upton Sinclair. And
Mhm.
that kind of stuff really progresses through the movie. Um, Mank seems to realize he has morals and he can't help himself but stick to them, even if it's beneficial for him to look the other way, right? Like you get that scene where the guy who makes the reels that are very anti Sinclair and doctored and whatnot,
Mhm.
like brings himself to tremendous grief, realizing that he basically like used his talents to mislead everyone about Upton Sinclair, and the election doesn't go his way as a result. That grief and Manx, like I don't know, like he has like a tenderness to him where he sees that it's like, yeah, this is probably all lost, but like he's just trying to like keep the guy off the edge and stuff. Like
Mhm.
everything around the politics stuff, I really enjoyed. I actually would have liked more of William Randolph Hearst just because I love Charles Dance.
Mhm.
And like he actually doesn't even have a whole lot of lines to be honest. A lot of times it's like him like looking at Mayer and looking at Mank and like nodding it or Seyfried and like he's like, yes, like he nods and stuff, but like oh
Then he gets the big moment with
yeah,
the parable at the end, which is
sure.
the whole thing, you know?
But like that's another exciting part about the movie too, is like William Randolph Hearst is, you know, the inspiration for this Charles Foster Kane. But like again, the movie Mank isn't like having Herman Mankiewicz like go on a whiteboard and be like, we're gonna do this, and this is because Hearst had this happen in his life. Like it's not like the Oliver Stone of it all, right? You know.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that political stuff really stuck out to me because again, it's resonant. Like seeing the media be manipulated, or use the media to manipulate the average person to get what you want politically. And in this case, again, it's a suppression of like socialist feeling and thoughts, right? And like you can't help but be like, wow, that is not that different from what it is 80 years later.
Yep. Absolutely not. Um, you know, just a thought that came to me, and then I want to circle back to the movie is I feel like the modern day Citizen Kane in a lot of ways is something like Succession, right? Instead of it being a movie, it's a series that kind of details the Murdochs and their the infighting within that family and all the weirdness. Just kind of an interesting thought. But to circle back, I actually a scene that really stood out to me was the walk and talk with Mayor. You kind of get Arliss Howard getting to have this huge monologue as they walk. He kind of gets the scream at one point, and it kind of leads into him asking all the people to take at MGM to take a pay cut, half of their salary.
Right.
And that scene, the way it's shot, where it's like him on the stage with the light coming down, like the crowd up, almost kind of like the Coliseum in a sense, I thought was just so beautifully done and really, I think, resonant of Citizen Kane in a lot of ways. Just I thought that was a masterful scene. I also really enjoyed when Mank goes out to talk with is it with Dance or who's he? Is he talking with Marion Davies' dad, right? Where they're outside at the shooting like the Western movie, and he kind of just walks onto the set and is
Oh yeah, well that's Hearst, and
that's her. Yeah, that's what I
they're
thought.
like dating, right, or
Yeah.
whatever. It's a
Yep.
kind of unique relationship,
For sure. But
given the age.
it's definitely I thought that was just a very interesting scene to watch and great interplay between them.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, it's a movie that I'm sad that I only got to watch one time before we spoke because I feel like you can go back and watch two or three times and you'll catch more lines, you'll pick up on more things, but the dialogue
right.
is so snappy. It's great.
And like there are callbacks to Kane where like they reference things about the script, and if you had just watched Citizen Kane, like, oh, I know what they're talking about here. It's like subtle lines, right? Like they mention something about a sled at one point, and you're like,
Hmm.
I know what that means, you know. Um, but yeah, I mean, the golden age of Hollywood of it all is just really cool to be because the movie's so um indebted to that kind of filmmaking, but also really, I think, accurate, or is trying to be as accurate as it can, right? And like just being on like an old school movies lot
Hmm.
when they were in their heyday like that is really cool. And it's scored by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, like just about everything these days. But I really like that score when you first get on the lot and Mank goes into the screenwriting room and you meet all those other screenwriters at the studio, and there's like subtle like keys going on when they're like going around in a circle again, nice
Yep.
rhythm to it and stuff. And then a new guy comes in and like they're like, and what's the finale? And like they all look at him and he just kind of bullshits something and they all look
Yeah.
back at him. It's like I thought I really captured like screenwriters,
Hmm. Well, yeah, and how old Hollywood is portrayed, like what it was supposedly like, really really well done. And I feel like there's just um, so much detail here that's really great. Um, I don't know. I guess we could go on and on about it, but where I'm kind of left with is, where does this fall in the Fincher filmography? You know, right? Like we talked about. There's the ones at the top. You have Zodiac, you have Social Network, and
Yeah.
probably for a lot of people, the third is uh
Fight Club.
Gone. Yeah, Fight Club or Gone Girl. Those are like the top four. You think it's like right after that, like that 5-6 range?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And again, like, yeah, it's not like a lot of his other stuff, right? You know, like Social Network, Mark Zuckerberg, and Charles Foster Kane. You can do a lot of connective tissue there if you want.
Hmm.
Um, I guess in a sense, this doesn't do a whole lot that Fincher hasn't done before. Like again, it's really non-linear and the persistence of flashbacks in this, but he's had flashbacks before, like with Social Network. But um, yeah, I think it's. I mean, I think it's an excellent film, and um, I think what there's to like about it. I think you just watch the movie for what it is, and like there's so much to appreciate and admire. In my opinion, I think the writing is really strong. You know,
Hmm.
and Oldman again, probably too old to actually be Mank, but Oldman's really good
Yep,
in the
really
movie,
good.
and you get a lot of good supporting performances. Like we said, Seyfried, perhaps her best performance ever, definitely her most impressive to me, and uh, even Lily Collins, Emily in Paris herself is here in kind of a
Hmm.
small role, but I actually really liked her as well. Good British accent when you're British, funny enough. And I saw some people noting that while its accuracy in like the sets and what we're visiting feel very much like the 30s and 40s, the movie actually isn't shot in like the aspect ratio of the time, even though you get those like put
Cigarette
on like
burns,
cigarette burns on like the film stock, the fake
or
film
like
stock.
the fade out of
Yeah,
scenes, those sorts of things.
but like
Yeah.
that doesn't really bother me if it's not like 100% like that. At the end of the day, like he made it for Netflix, so he still made it in widescreen. That's all good. Um, we really would have loved to watch this in the theater though,
Yeah.
just because then you could really like lock in the cinematography and the score and stuff.
Hmm.
But it's still a really good home watch. I turned my phone off for it just to really lock in.
Yeah, it's definitely worth the watch, and Fincher is the best, if or one of the best doing it right now. So, um, give us your Mank thoughts. Leave them below.